Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on the Invest channel. We have another big one for you today. So, what just happened was Google Q4 earnings, which actually it's literally right now still going on. I'm just too excited because there's a lot to share, and I want to talk about some stuff. So there might be some more quotes that come out after that maybe I'll bring up in the next video. And then we have one price target upgrade or initiation actually that I'll talk about as well. But I want to dive in these Q4 earnings or Q2 earnings for Google because a lot of implications here. So first piece of news. This is sort of something that came out before earnings, and no confirmation of it, but was a really interesting kind of hint into what might be going on. So I kind of tweeted here, huge for Nebius, UBS. So UBS is a one of the more fairly reliable big firms that are have an analysis. Good lord, analysts, and they see capex for Google for 2027 being 325 to 375 billion. For context, before Q2 earnings, Google's capex was between 180 and 190 billion. So what that would mean is nearly another double of capex spend for full year 2027. Which, if true, and Google, I'll kind of spoil it right now. Google didn't guide for 2027. I think they don't like it, or they don't want to do it because the market doesn't like capex spend. But if this is true, then we're not seeing any slowdown until at least 2029. At the minimum, is when we'll see a slowdown. Then what happened is Google earnings. So if we take a look here, Google destroyed revenue, 119.8 billion versus 116.8. So they beat revenue by 3 billion. EPS, massive beat. Now the reason for this, massive caveat, I think like $6 of it is because of their shares in SpaceX and shares in Anthropic or something like that they sold. And so that's why we see a massive EPS beat. Search essentially guided. And then the big one here, and this applies a lot to Nebius because they're in the same space, cloud. Cloud grew 82% year over year versus the 64% estimate. Yes, you heard that right. 82% on a company that's doing tens of billions in revenue in cloud. They grew that 82%. I mean, just unbelievable numbers. They also have a couple of things here. Cloud backlog is now $500 billion in cloud backlog, which again doesn't seem like a real number. Tokens per minute. This is something interesting and just something to be aware of just token spend increasing. This quarter it was 22 billion tokens per minute. By the way, I don't remember what it was last quarter, but I know it was a significant increase. And then this is just the graph here. Oh, here you go. Versus 16 billion the prior quarter for token increase. So again, we're probably going to see that being 30 to 34 billion by Q3, which just shows the massive increase in token spend, which is bullish. Again, Nebius. Now, people are wondering, or I've had a couple of questions of why does Google increasing CapEx matter? Nebius doesn't have a contract with Google. Who cares? Well, first of all, the point is the general trend of the big companies, because what they're doing right now is they're all just competing each other. They're trying to outcompete each other. So if Amazon comes in and increases CapEx, Google's like, crap. Now we got to increase CapEx, make sure we still keep up. It's just an AI race right now. And so the general trend is what's important. Seeing a continued build out, seeing continuation of CapEx spend is important, whether or not the companies partner with Nebius or not. It's super important to see that CapEx increase because it's a general tailwind to all of the infrastructure companies. We also saw that with TSM in their earnings last week. They're also increasing CapEx. Well, that doesn't affect Nebius. Well, listen, by proxy or, kind of in correlation, it does. Now, next thing here was this is also related to Google. Now they have 950 million Gemini users and process, again, 22 billion API tokens a minute compared to the 750 million back in February. So they grew 200 million monthly Gemini users. Again, super absurd growth, but also just super important to note that they're spending all this money on this build out. Where's the ROI? Well, they're growing. They just grew 200 million of users in Gemini. That number will probably be 1.1 billion by the end of 2026 fiscal year. So again, you're starting to see a user growth ROI, which then becomes some sort of ROI down the line. Another big thing, and this is one of the biggest pieces here. We'll get to the biggest in a second, which I have some speculation on. Google updates their 2026 capex to 195 to 205 billion, up from the 180 to 190 billion. So again, they raised capex by 10 to 15 billion for 2026, and we're only in Q2. We'll see what they do in Q3. and Q4, I think that number is going to be closer to 225 billion when it's all said and done. And so therefore that 325 to 375 by UBS doesn't seem unlikely. Which is just, even saying that out loud is insane. A company spending $300 billion, one company, on the AI build out. Next piece. Now, bear with me. This was when I literally was just listening to the call. I literally had my headphones on right before I was hopping this, like typing notes and making sure I caught everything. Google said something super interesting, and so we're going to go ahead and talk about it. So 3 things. The first we already covered. They're increasing capex by 10 to 15 billion. This second piece is what's really insane. In the third quarter, we expect to continue to build out using third-party providers, which will hurt our margins. Yes, you heard that. Third-party providers. Now, we already know they have a partnership, or I guess deal, with SpaceX. And so I would assume they will continue using SpaceX. But, there's a high likelihood they don't only use SpaceX. We also know that Nebius says they only want to sign one more hyperscaler contract. They specifically say, I don't know if in their commentary they say hyperscaler / AI lab, but I if I remember correctly, I think it was just hyperscaler contract. And so I'm speculating now that I think it's going to be Google. And they said it in Q3, by the way. Google said in Q3 will start to use third-party providers. So I think it'd be interesting if during Q2 earnings, which are speculated for Nebius to be in a week or two, they announce the Google contract. Now, the reason I'm saying they announced it during earnings, if you guys remember in Q3 last year, so November of last year, the Meta deal was announced with an initial $3 billion in November of 2026 or 2025. And so I could see something where it's a 3 to 5 to 10 billion initial contract with Google, and then Google extends it as they continue to, build their capex, raise their capex, and everything there. So just my speculation. Obviously, I will also make a massive earnings prediction video probably next week. Once we get confirmation of when earnings actually is, I'm assuming it's the week of August 3rd, which, by the way, I will be in Switzerland. So we'll see what I'm going to be doing that week. But that was the big thing. And here's a more direct quote that, my buddy Wealthmatica kind of quoted a little better. Given the supply constrained environment, we plan to expand the use of third-party capacity in Q3 as a bridging strategy while we build out more internal capacity. So again, I think Nebius is possible here. And I think it'd be Nebius's last hyperscaler contract. And I would prefer it to be Google. The reason why, a couple of reasons why. Well, one, it's just more of an established company. I think partnering with Anthropic, OpenAI it's a little more risky, right? These companies make $0 in EPS, $0 in net income, unprofitable companies, and we're also seeing a large wave of closed source being kind of the devil now, and open source kind of being the new thing. And so I think I would prefer Nebius to. And you also see Nebius, contracting or having partnerships with open source platforms. And so I would like it to be more of a Google, which is a more of a consistent generating company. Now, on cash flow generating company, this is the first quarter of negative free cash flow. So, for those that don't know, they've been free cash flow positive, as you can see, before even 2015. So for the past decade, they've been free cash flow positive. This is their first quarter of going negative free cash flow, meaning they are not slowing down the build out. They're spending all the cash they have that they generate into this build out. And so it's their first quarter, which I think the market's not going to like. If we actually take a look at Google earnings, we can take a look here. Or Google, how it's reacting, the stock is reacting. It's down 4% after its earnings. Earnings were great. But again, I just think the market does not like increasing in capex and in cash flow being negative, free cash flow being negative. But I don't understand, because they have a $500 billion Google Cloud backlog, and Google Cloud went from 63% estimate to an 82% growth estimate. And they're selling everything out. Hello, there's a clear ROI there. So I don't know why it's selling off because of that. The market just doesn't understand. But take a look, Nebius is not selling off. It's actually up almost 5% after hours. After that hearing, essentially that happened literally, 40 minutes ago when I was listening to the call, and then boom, it spiked. From 3% up to 5.5%, almost 6%. And so the market is kind of speculating the same way I am, that they specifically said a third party provider. And so I think Nebius is a clear contender for one of the companies. I think IREN's up there as well. And also CoreWave. I think all three of them could be possible deals with them because Meta did the same thing, and Microsoft. Microsoft went to all three. Meta went to Nebius and CoreWave. Nothing confirmed with IREN yet, but it's definitely possible. And I think Google could do the same thing as they continue to build out their compute infrastructure. So I wanted to come on and just kind of talk about that because I thought it was super interesting and obviously applies heavily to Nebius. As a Nebius investor, you need to understand what the big boys are doing, where they're putting their money, what they're talking about, the consensus from them, and they're seeing massive ROI. And the build out is not slowing down. One last thing they also said was that they will see significant increase in capex in 2027, and so again, that UBS report of that 325 to 375 could be pretty accurate. And even if Google comes in and let's say it's not growing 100% year over year, because I think we need to understand that Google can't grow capex 100% year over year for the next 3 years. It has to slow down at some point on a sequential growth basis. On a nominal or dollar amount, I think it's going to continue to increase for the next 5 to 10 years. If they do, let's say 225 this year, 300 next year, 350 the following year, 400 the following year, 425 the following year. I mean, and Nebius at a $50 billion market cap. I mean, come on. It's only beneficial to them. Obviously up until a certain point, but still over the next 3 years, like it's smooth sailing for infrastructure plays. Obviously the neoclouds, obviously, I think the semis, photonics, fiber optics, cooling, all of these companies, we're just getting started. And I think this earnings again proves it. We also have Meta and Microsoft, I think, over the next 2 weeks, as well as even Amazon too, I believe. All of them will report before Nebius, and so we'll get a really good read on what Nebius is doing. And again, we know they're selling out. They're probably going to sell it again. So yeah, just wanted to go ahead and talk about Google there. I do think a partnership is a lot more likely than I initially anticipated based off that exact commentary. And I have some speculation that Nebius could announce it during the earnings call, in a press release like they did last time for Meta in Q3 of last year. So last piece of news, just a quick little bite. Baird initiated coverage of Nebius at a $250 price target, which again, that's bullish. I'm trying to see if we can find the overall commentary. So Baird says Nebius' token factory inference service helps position it as a full stack provider, and the company has taken an aggressive approach to M&A, which the firm values is in such a rapidly evolving market. The analyst tells investors. They also mentioned essentially, the XE Index team, and actually gave honestly decent analysis for why they initiated a price target on Nebius, why it matters. Here's actually more of an official press release, or an official commentary. So our bullish thesis is based upon four things: strong full stack offering, well positioned for inference; 2, diversifying the customer base, which I agree with as well; 3, the highest growth in the sector. Fair enough. I mean, I think that's sort of a little bit of an elementary take, but it's okay. 4, veteran management team and employee base Yandex carve out, which that's for me number one as to why I invest in this company. And I'm sure people that follow me on X and also heard my YouTube. I mean, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but this is why you invest in management team and the culture. But either way, that's everything I have. Also, appreciate everyone that watched the Data Center Monthly yesterday. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We did almost 2 hours. For those that don't know, me and another creator do Data Center Monthly, where we talk about just updating the news on IREN, CoreWeave, and Nebius for the month previously. So we spent a lot of time yesterday. We brought on a guest, Tevis, Fun of Investing. I'm sure most of you, if you know his channel, if you know my channel, you definitely know his channel. So I appreciate you guys for following that and listening to that. I think we had like 30 to 40 viewers average the whole time, which is really cool to think about. I mean, just envisioning 40 people in one room listening to my goofy ass talk about neoclouds I think is I'm really appreciative and it's super fun to do. But yeah, that's all I have. I just wanted to kind of come on. I was a little giddy when I heard what Google said, and so I wanted just to come on and release that giddiness to you guys, and you guys also take it in. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think there's a chance that Nebius partners with Google? Do you think I'm reaching? Yeah, you curious to hear what you guys think. Again, I appreciate the support. Appreciate you guys following along and watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.